I never thought I'd end up here. Alone on a piece of rock barely big enough to call an island, watching the mainland burn from a distance that feels both too close and impossibly far. The radio crackled to life 3 months ago while I was out on the water. I remember the exact moment. Sunday afternoon, late September. The kind of day where the lake looks like hammered silver and the air smells like pine and gasoline. I'd been checking the trolling motor, hands black with grease, when the emergency broadcast cut through the classic rock station I'd been half listening to. This is Daniel Rothman broadcasting from emergency station. If you're hearing this, find shelter immediately. Do not attempt to reach hospitals or police stations. I repeat, do not go to populated areas. They were receiving reports of attacks across the metropolitan area. People are... Emily, show me that footage again. Jesus Christ. A woman's voice in the background, shaky. Daniel, we need to... I know. Folks, this was Emily, my assistant. We're going to stay on air as long as we can. What we're seeing is, there's no other way to say this. The dead are attacking the living. I know how that sounds. I know. But we've got confirmed reports from Portland, Seattle, Eugene. It's spreading fast. I stood there in my boat, 17-footer with a temperamental outboard, grease dripping from my fingers onto the deck, and I thought, some asshole's idea of a joke. War of the Worlds bullshit for the internet age. Then Daniel Rothman played the audio from a 911 call. A woman screaming, wet, tearing sounds. The operator asking her to stay calm, to lock the doors, and the woman just shrieking, "He's eating her face, he's eating her face," until the line went dead. I looked toward the shore. Couple miles out on Crater Lake, far enough that the campsites looked like toy buildings, close enough to see a thin column of smoke rising from somewhere near the East Access Road. My phone had no signal. Never did out here. That was part of why I came. That and because my house, the house I'd paid for, the house where I'd lived for 8 years with Jennifer, wasn't mine anymore. Hadn't been for 6 months. Not since I came home early from a fishing trip and found her fucking Brandon fucking Peterson in our bed. Brandon with his CrossFit body and his tech startup and his fucking Tesla. So I'd been living on the boat, sleeping in the cabin that smelled like mildew and old beer, eating canned soup heated on a camp stove, telling myself it was temporary. Telling myself I was figuring things out. The island wasn't even an island, not really. Just a rocky outcropping about 40 yards across, covered in scrub brush and a few twisted pines that grew sideways from the constant wind. There was a depression in the center. Natural shelter from a volcanic bubble that collapsed centuries ago, leaving a shallow cave barely tall enough to stand in. I'd been using it to store gear. Coolers, fishing equipment, a tarp, some rope. Emergency supplies I kept telling myself I didn't need. Daniel Rothman stayed on the air for 3 hours that first day. He and Emily took calls from people trapped in their homes, in their cars, in stores and office buildings. Each call worse than the last. A man whispering that his daughter was trying to break through the bathroom door, that she didn't sound like his daughter anymore. A woman calling from a grocery store where someone had gotten bit in the produce section, and now half the store was running and screaming, and she could hear gunshots. "Do not engage," Daniel kept saying. "Find a secure location. Wait for emergency services." But even he didn't sound convinced. Emily's voice cracked when she said, "Daniel, I'm seeing reports that emergency services aren't responding. The hospitals they're saying people shouldn't go to the hospitals." I steered the boat toward the island. Didn't think about it. Just did it. Started loading things from the boat into the cave. My camping gear first. The Coleman stove, the propane tanks, my sleeping bag, or the waterproof duffels with my clothes. Then the food. I had maybe 4 days' worth of canned goods, some rice, a box of granola bars that had been sitting in the cabin since July. The generator was the heaviest. Portable Honda, loud as hell but reliable. I'd used it to power lights during night fishing. Dragged it up the rocky slope and into the cave, my back screaming. I was 43 years old, and sitting on a boat drinking beer for 6 months hadn't done wonders for my conditioning. By the time the sun started dropping, I'd made 3 trips. The boat was nearly empty. I had maybe 200 feet of rope, a tackle box, my fishing rods, a toolbox, the generator, 5 gallons of gas, a water filtration pump, and enough food to last a week if I was careful. The radio kept broadcasting. Daniel Rothman sounded tired. We're getting reports that the military has established checkpoints around major cities. If you're in a safe location, stay there. If you're mobile, head for the checkpoints. But be advised that routes are congested, and there have been multiple incidents on the highways. Emily's pulling up traffic cams now, and Christ, it's a parking lot out there. I looked back toward the mainland. More smoke now, thicker. The sun was setting behind the mountains, and the sky was the color of a bruise. My phone buzzed. Single bar of signal, probably bouncing off a tower that was about to go down. Text from Jennifer. Are you okay? Where are you? I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then the signal dropped and the message failed to send anyway. Didn't matter. She had Brandon, he'd take care of her. And he had that big house in the suburbs with the security system and the 3-car garage. They'd be fine. I told myself that while I strung rope between the trees, creating anchor points. Told myself that while I spread the tarp over the cave entrance to keep rain out. Told myself that while I sat on a rock and ate cold beans straight from the can and watched the glow on the horizon grow brighter as something big burned in the distance. Daniel Rothman's broadcast ended at 11:47 p.m. I know because I was watching the clock on the radio, watching the battery indicator, rationing power. This is Daniel Rothman. Emily and I are going to sign off now. We've done what we can. If you're hearing this recording, the information still stands. Find shelter. Avoid population centers. Wait for help. The government will restore order. They have to. Emily wants to say something. Emily's voice steadier now. Stay safe. Take care of each other. We're going to try to make it to the emergency shelter at the Civic Center. If we can get back on air, we will. If not, good luck. Then static. I tried other stations. Got nothing but emergency broadcast tones or dead air. One station played the national anthem on loop. Another was just someone screaming. I turned the radio off. Sat in the dark. Listened to water lapping against the rocks and wind moving through the pines and absolutely nothing else. That first night, I didn't sleep. Kept thinking I heard boats. Kept thinking I saw lights moving on the water. Just my brain inventing threats, because the real threat was too big and too far away and too impossible. When the sun came up, the world looked normal. Lakes smooth as glass. Birds calling. A fish jumped near the south side of the island, rings spreading across the surface. I made coffee on the camp stove. Instant tastes like dirt, but the ritual helped. Gave my hands something to do. The generator had enough gas for maybe 10 hours of runtime. I could stretch it if I only used it for essentials. Charging the radio, the spotlight, my phone, even though the towers were probably dead. I had 5 gallons in reserve. That was it. I needed more fuel, needed food, needed to know what the hell was actually happening. The nearest marina was 6 miles south. Little place called Ridgeway Landing, just a dock and a store that sold bait and beer and overpriced camping supplies. The owner was a guy named Kurt Milligan, who always smelled like cigarettes and complained about government regulations, and I fired up the outboard. It coughed, sputtered, caught. The sound was obscenely loud in the morning quiet, echoing off the water. I waited, listening for answering sounds. Voices, engines, anything. Nothing. The trip took 40 minutes because I kept the throttle low, trying to stay quiet. Which was stupid because the engine was still a roaring monster compared to the silence. I came around the southern point and saw the marina. Kurt's truck was parked at an angle across the dock entrance. The driver's door hung open. Something dark stained the seat. The store's windows were intact. The beer sign still flickered in the window, running off some backup battery. Everything looked normal except for the truck and the stain and the fact that I couldn't see a single person anywhere. I tied off at the end of the dock, as far from the truck as I could manage. Grabbed the aluminum baseball bat I kept for bonking fish. Stupid weapon, but it was what I had. The dock swayed under my feet. I moved slow, watching the tree line, watching the store, watching the truck. The stain on the seat was definitely blood. Lots of it. Dried brown, flies buzzing. No body, though. The store door was unlocked. Bell chimed when I pushed it open, and I nearly shit myself from the noise. Stood frozen in the doorway, bat raised, waiting for something to come screaming out of the aisles. Nothing moved. Inside smelled like old coffee and something sweet rotten. The coolers were still running, humming in the background. I moved down the center aisle. Chips and candy bars on one side, motor oil and propane canisters on the other. The register was open, empty. Someone had cleaned it out. The back room was where Kurt kept the extra stock. I pushed through the plastic strip curtain and the smell got worse. Meat smell. Bathroom smell. Kurt was on the floor near the bathroom, or what was left of him. Something had opened up his stomach and pulled things out. His face was gray and his eyes were open and there were bite marks on his arms, his neck, his face. Human bite marks. I could see the tooth impressions. I backed out of the room, hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped the bat. Found the fuel cans near the dock pump. 6 5-gallon containers, 3 of them full. I loaded them into the boat, moving fast now, constantly looking over my shoulder. Grabbed a case of motor oil too. Went back into the store and filled a garbage bag with anything useful. Batteries, duct tape, a first aid kit, a box of waterproof matches, energy bars, beef jerky, 3 bottles of whiskey because I figured I'd need it. The coolers had beer and soda and sandwiches that were probably already bad. Took the beer, left the sandwiches, grabbed lunch meat and cheese and a loaf of bread that was only starting to mold on one corner. I was back on the dock when I heard it. Crackling sound from inside the store. The radio behind the counter, the one Kurt always kept on some talk station. Daniel Rothman's voice, rough like he'd been screaming. Day 2 of the outbreak. If you're hearing this, we're broadcasting from an unknown location. Emily and I made it out of the Civic Center before it was overrun. We're going to keep broadcasting as long as we can. Here's what we know. The infection spreads through bites. Symptoms appear within hours. Our victims become violent, lose all cognitive function, and attack the living. There is no cure. I repeat, there is no cure. The military has established green zones in some areas, but most cities are under quarantine. Do not attempt to enter quarantine zones. You will be shot on sight. Emily's voice in the background. Daniel, we're almost out of time. Right. If you're in a safe location, fortify it. Ration your supplies. Avoid contact with infected individuals. We'll broadcast again when we can. This is Daniel Rothman, signing off. I stood there holding a garbage bag full of stolen supplies and listening to the dead air that followed. Then I heard the moan. Not from the store. From the tree line past the parking lot, low sound, wet and ragged, like someone trying to breathe through a throat full of blood. Kurt stumbled out from between two pines. Except it wasn't Kurt anymore. His intestines hung from the hole in his belly, dragging in the dirt. His eyes were white, filmed over. His mouth hung open, and that sound kept coming out, that horrible broken moan. He saw me, or sensed me. Whatever was left in his brain registered movement or heat or living flesh, and he changed direction, lurching toward the dock. I ran, threw the garbage bag into the boat, yanked the starter cord on the outboard. It didn't catch. Kurt was on the dock now, moving faster than he should have been able to with half his guts hanging out, 15 feet away. 10. I pulled the cord again. The engine coughed and died. Kurt's hands reached out. Fingers gray and swollen, nails torn off. That sound coming from his throat, that awful hungry sound. Third pull, the engine roared to life. I threw the throttle forward, and the boat lurched away from the dock. Kurt stumbled to the edge, reaching, and then he just stepped off into the water. He sank immediately, the weight of his waterlogged boots, or maybe the intestines, acting like an anchor. I saw him go under, saw the bubbles come up, and then nothing. I didn't slow down until I was halfway back to the island. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely steer. Kept seeing Kurt's face, the white eyes, the bite marks, the way he'd stepped into the water without hesitation. Like the thing that used to be Kurt Milligan didn't understand drowning anymore. Didn't understand anything except hunger. I beached the boat on the island's rocky shore and sat there for a long time, breathing hard, tasting bile in the back of my throat. So then I unloaded the fuel and the supplies, and I didn't leave the island again for 2 weeks. Those first weeks were about routine. Routine kept you sane. Routine meant you didn't think too hard about what was happening on the mainland, or whether anyone you knew was still alive or human. Wake up at dawn. Check the perimeter. Make sure nothing had washed up during the night. No bodies, no boats, no infected somehow swimming out from shore. Boil water for coffee. Eat something. Granola bar, can of fruit, handful of nuts. Check the supplies. Inventory everything. Know exactly what you have and how long it will last. Fishing took up most of the day. The lake had trout and bass, and if you were patient, you could catch enough to supplement the canned food. I'd gut them on the rocks, away from the cave so the smell wouldn't attract animals. Cook them over a small fire that I kept burning in a pit I dug on the lee side of the island, where the smoke would disperse quickly. I listened to the radio every night. Daniel Rothman and Emily broadcast sporadically, sometimes once a day, sometimes not for days. They'd moved locations several times. Never said where they were, just that they were still alive, still trying to provide information. The infection has spread globally, Daniel said one night, his voice flat with exhaustion. We're seeing reports from Europe, Asia, Australia. Major cities have fallen. The U.S. government has relocated to an undisclosed location. FEMA has established survivor camps, but they're overcrowded and undersupplied. Riots have broken out in several locations. Emily's compiled a list of operational ham radio frequencies where survivors are coordinating. I'll read them slowly. I wrote down the frequencies on the back of a tackle receipt with a pencil stub. Tried them later. Got mostly static. One channel had someone reading Bible verses. Another was just someone sobbing. A third channel had cross chatter from what sounded like a military unit. Coordinates being called out. Casualty reports, someone screaming about needing air support, and then gunfire, and then screaming, and then nothing. I turned the radio off and sat in the dark and drank a whiskey until I couldn't think anymore. The generator was the problem. Always the generator. I rationed gas carefully, running it only an hour each evening to charge batteries and the radio. But fuel doesn't last forever, and I'd gone through 3 of the 5-gallon cans already, which meant I needed to go back. Not to Ridgeway Landing. I'd stripped that place, and Kurt was probably still down there in the water, and I didn't want to find out if he'd eventually drag himself back to shore. The city was 20 miles north. Real city, population 60,000, with a harbor and marinas, and plenty of boats that would have fuel. Also lots of people. Or things that used to be people. I spent 3 days preparing. Filled water bottles, packed a bag with first aid supplies, rope, a knife, the bat, a flashlight. Found a road flare in the boat's emergency kit. Wasn't sure what I'd do with it, but it felt important to have. The night before I planned to leave, Daniel Rothman came on the air. This is Daniel Rothman broadcasting on emergency frequency. It's been 43 days since the initial outbreak. Emily and I have been documenting the progression of the infection and coordinating with other survivors. We've learned some things. The infected are attracted to sound and movement. They can't swim, they just sink. They're stronger than they should be, and they don't feel pain. Headshots work. So does decapitation or destroying the brainstem. Fire works, but it takes time, and they'll keep coming while they burn. Emily's voice, steadier than it had been at the start. We've also confirmed that everyone who dies becomes infected, regardless of whether they were bitten. If someone dies in your group, you need to destroy the brain immediately or restrain them until you can. We've seen too many people die thinking their loved ones would stay dead. Daniel again. We're moving again tomorrow. Our current location is compromised. If you're listening, stay strong. Find other survivors if you can, but be careful. Not everyone has remained civilized. We've heard reports of groups attacking other survivors for supplies. Trust is a luxury now. The broadcast ended with Emily reading off a list of safe zones that were supposedly still operational. None of them were anywhere near me. I left at first light. The lake was calm, fog hanging low over the water. The outboard sounded like a chainsaw cutting through church silence. I kept the throttle at half, conserving fuel, watching the shore. The harbor came into view around 9 a.m. Boats everywhere. Dozens of them, tied to docks or anchored in the bay. Sailboats, our fishing trawlers, yachts, pontoons. Some had clearly been abandoned in a hurry. Hatches open, sails half-rigged, gear scattered on decks. One yacht was burning, had been for a while from the look of it. The hull was blackened, the mast collapsed. Smoke still rose in a thin column. I didn't see any people. The main harbor had a fuel dock. Big pumps, the kind that could fill a boat's tank in minutes. I pulled up slow, killed the engine when I was still 30 feet out, let momentum carry me in. Grabbed the dock and tied off. Silence. Just wind and water and the creak of boats straining against their moorings. The pumps were electric, dead without power. But the harbor master's office would have keys to the manual pump, the backup for when the power went out during storms. The office was a small building at the end of the main dock. Door was closed, but not locked. I pushed it open with the bat, ready to swing. Empty. Desk covered in papers. Coffee mug with something growing in it. Computer monitor dark. Radio on the shelf behind the desk. Turned off. Keys hanging on a pegboard. I grabbed the one labeled fuel. The manual pump was around the side of the building, locked behind a chain-link fence. The key opened the padlock. The pump itself was old, hand-cranked, the kind that would take forever to fill a 5-gallon can, but it would work. I started with the empties from the boat, cranking the handle, watching the fuel crawl up the sight glass. My shoulders burned. The crank squeaked with each rotation, loud in the quiet. Something crashed inside one of the nearby buildings. I froze. Listened. Another crash. Glass breaking. Then that sound. That wet moaning. I cranked faster. The fuel can was half full. Not enough. Needed at least 2 full cans to make the trip worthwhile. A door slammed open 2 buildings down. A woman stumbled out. Her dress was torn, covered in black stains. Her hair hung in clumps. She moved with that jerky, wrong gait, like her joints didn't work right anymore. She saw me. Made that sound, that horrible, eager moan, and started toward the dock. I kept cranking. Can was 3/4 full now. The woman was on the dock. Behind her, 2 more figures emerged from the building. A man in a security guard uniform, 1 arm missing. A kid, couldn't have been more than 12. Face caved in on one side. The can clicked full. I screwed the cap on, grabbed it, started on the second can. The woman was 20 feet away. Second can filling. Too slow. The woman was 10 feet away. I could smell her. Smell the rot in the old blood and something else, something chemical and wrong. 5 feet. I grabbed the half-full can, screwed the cap on fast, and swung the bat. Caught her in the side of the head. She went down but started getting back up immediately. The impact would have killed a person. Should have killed a person. I ran for the boat, fuel cans banging against my legs. The guard and the kid were on the dock now, moving faster. I threw the cans into the boat, untied the line, pulled the starter cord. The engine didn't catch. The kid was 15 feet away. Up close, I could see the bite marks on his shoulder, the gray skin, the white eyes. He'd been someone's son. Someone had probably died trying to protect him. I pulled the cord again. Engine sputtered. 10 feet. Third pull, and the engine roared. And I slammed the throttle forward. The boat jerked away from the dock. The kid reached the edge just as I cleared the pilings, grabbing at empty air, and then he toppled forward into the water. He sank. Just like Kurt. The guard reached the edge and stepped off too, following the kid down into the dark water like lemmings. The woman I'd hit was standing again, swaying at the edge of the dock, making that sound. I didn't look back. Got halfway to the island before I realized I was crying. Just tears streaming down my face, no sound. Just this helpless, leaking grief for a kid who'd probably been riding his bike or playing video games or complaining about homework when the world ended. I made it back to the island with enough fuel for another month if I was careful. Put the cans in the cave, tied the boat up, went and sat on a rock staring at nothing until the sun went down. That night, I drank an entire bottle of whiskey and threw up in the lake and passed out on the rocky beach. Woke up at dawn with a hangover that felt like my skull was splitting and rocks imprinted on my face. Routine. Had to stick to routine. Check perimeter. Make coffee. Inventory supplies. Fish. Listen to the radio. Sleep. Repeat. Daniel Rothman didn't broadcast for 5 days. When he finally came back on, he sounded different. Older. This is Daniel Rothman. Emily's dead. She was bitten 4 days ago while we were scavenging for supplies. She hid it from me. Thought she could fight it. By the time I knew, it was too late. I had to shoot her. I buried her this morning. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. To anyone listening, I'm sorry. I'm sorry we couldn't save more people. I'm sorry this is how it ends. I'll keep broadcasting as long as I can. For Emily. She'd want me to keep going. His voice broke on the last word. The broadcast ended. I sat in the cave with the radio, staring at the static, and I thought about Jennifer. Wondered if she was still alive. If Brandon had protected her. If they'd made it to one of the safe zones. Or if she was out there somewhere, shambling through ruined streets with white eyes and gray skin and that terrible hunger. I told myself I didn't care. Told myself she'd made her choice when she fucked Brandon Peterson in our bed. Didn't help. 2 months into the island living, and I had a system. The cave was organized like a tiny apartment. Supplies on one side sorted by type. Sleeping area on the other, with the sleeping bag on a bed of pine branches to keep it off the cold stone. The generator outside under a tarp lean-to. Fire pit 30 feet away, positioned so the wind carried smoke away from the cave. I'd built a crude shower using a bucket with holes punched in the bottom, hung from a tree branch. Solar heated by leaving it in the sun all day. Luxury, but it kept me from going completely feral. The fishing was good. I'd caught enough trout to smoke some over the fire, preserving them for when the fishing was bad or when I couldn't risk a fire. I had a system for that too. Thin strips of fish laid on a rack made from green branches, slow smoke from alder wood that gave it a sweet taste. I'd even started a garden. Stupid, probably pointless. But I'd found some seeds in the store back at Ridgeway Landing, and I'd cleared a patch of dirt and planted them. Tomatoes, beans, lettuce. Something to do. Something to hope for. The radio was my only connection to the outside world. Daniel Rothman broadcast every few days. He'd found another survivor, a woman named Patricia, who knew about radio equipment. Together, they were trying to set up a network, connecting isolated survivors, sharing information about safe zones and infected movements. "We've confirmed that the infected are migrating," Daniel said one night. "Moving in herds, hundreds at a time, following sound or movement or some instinct we don't understand. If you're in a static location, stay quiet. If you see a herd approaching, get out of the way. Don't try to fight them. There are too many." Patricia's voice, unprofessional and calm. "We're also hearing reports of mutations, infected that move faster than others, some that seem to retain rudimentary problem-solving skills. These reports are unconfirmed, but we advise extreme caution. The infection may be evolving." That was a cheerful thought. Zombies getting smarter. I needed fuel again. The city was too dangerous, too many infected concentrated in one place. But there were other marinas, other small towns around the lake. I started ranging farther, exploring the shoreline in the boat, looking for opportunities. Found a tackle shop that had been looted, but still had some useful gear. Grabbed fishing line, hooks, a new knife. The infected had been through the place. I could tell from the overturned shelves and the dried blood on the floor. But they'd moved on. I found a campground with a maintenance shed that had 2-stroke engine oil and a chainsaw that still worked. Took both. The chainsaw was loud as hell, and I'd probably never use it. But it felt good to have options. Found a small general store on the North Shore that hadn't been touched. Door was locked, windows intact. I broke in through the back. Inside was a gold mine. Canned food, batteries, first aid supplies, propane canisters, even some ammunition for a caliber I didn't have a gun for, but I took it anyway. I was loading a box into the boat when I heard the engine. Boat engine coming from the east. I dropped the box and grabbed the bat, listening. The sound got louder. Coming this way. A fishing boat rounded the point. Bigger than mine, maybe 25 feet. 2 men on board. One driving, one standing at the bow with a rifle. And they saw me. The boat turned, heading straight for me. I could run. Get in my boat, fire up the outboard, try to outrun them. Or I could wait, see what they wanted. Maybe they were friendly. Maybe they were just desperate like me. The rifle decided it for me. I waited. They pulled up alongside the dock. The man with the rifle kept it pointed in my general direction. Not at me exactly, but close enough. "You alone?" he called. I nodded. "Armed?" I held up the bat. He laughed. That's it? Shit, man. You're lucky it's us and not some of the assholes running around out here. The driver killed the engine. Both men looked rough, bearded, sunburned, wearing filthy clothes. But they looked alive, human, eyes clear, moving normally. I'm Gary, the rifleman said. This is Tom. We're based out of a camp about 10 miles south. Got maybe 20 people, good security, supplies. You interested? I hesitated. The island was safe, isolated, under control. A camp meant other people, politics, risk. But it also meant help, resources, information. What kind of camp? I asked. Gary shrugged. Survivor camp. We've got a good thing going. Fishing, scavenging runs, defense. We're looking for people who can contribute. You seem like you know what you're doing out here. I'm doing fine on my own. Yeah, I bet. Until you get hurt or sick or run out of supplies you can't replace. Gary lowered the rifle slightly. Look, I'm not trying to pressure you. Just extending an invitation. We're at the old Lakeview Resort, South Shore. Big fence, good visibility. You ever change your mind, come find us. We can always use another pair of hands. Tom spoke for the first time. You seen any herds lately? Herds? Infected. Groups of them. We've been tracking a big one, maybe 200, moving along the east shore. They're slow, but they keep going, day and night. Just wanted to warn you in case they head this way. 200 infected, moving along the shore. If they reach the mainland closest to my island. Thanks for the warning, I said. Gary nodded. Take care of yourself. Offer stands if you want it. They fired up the engine and left. I watched them go, thinking about what they'd said. 20 people, organization, security, but also 20 people's worth of noise and conflict and competition for resources. I went back to loading the boat. That night, I dreamed about Jennifer. We were in our old house, before everything, before Brandon, and she was making breakfast. Pancakes. I could smell them cooking. She was laughing at something I'd said, and the sunlight was coming through the kitchen window, and everything was perfect and normal. Then the smoke alarm went off, and the pancakes were burning, and when I looked at her, she had white eyes and gray skin, and she lunged across the table with her mouth open, and I woke up in the cave, tangled in the sleeping bag, heart pounding. The radio was on. I'd fallen asleep listening to it. Daniel Rothman's voice, low and tired. Day 71. Patricia and I are still broadcasting. We've made contact with several survivor groups. Things are complicated. Resources are running low everywhere. People are getting desperate. We've heard reports of camps turning violent, attacking other survivors for supplies. I don't know what to tell you anymore. Stay alive. Stay human. Hell, that's all I've got. I lay there in the dark, listening to the static after the broadcast ended, and I thought about Gary's invitation. The herd came 3 days later. I was fishing off the north side of the island, line in the water, half dozing in the weak November sun, when I heard it. Moaning. Lots of moaning. A chorus of that wet, broken sound echoing across the water. I reeled in fast and climbed to the highest point on the island. From there, I could see the mainland shore about a mile away. They were spread along the beach like a dark stain. Hundreds of them, moving slow but steady, following the curve of the shoreline. Some waded into the water up to their knees, then turned and walked back to shore like they'd hit an invisible wall. None of them could swim. They just kept walking along the beach, an endless, shambling mass. I watched them for hours. They didn't thin out. Just kept coming. I tried to count them and gave up after 150. Tom had said 200. Looked about right. They passed the island without pausing. None of them looked toward it. They just followed the shore, driven by whatever broken instinct kept them moving. By evening, they were past, continuing south, toward the camp Gary had mentioned. I thought about trying to warn them. The radio had a transmit function. I could broadcast on the frequencies Daniel had provided, hope someone at the camp heard it. But I didn't. They'd seemed capable, armed, alert. They'd probably spotted the herd already. Not my problem. I told myself that while I sat in the cave, eating cold beans and listening to the radio, or told myself that while I tried to sleep and kept seeing that dark stain of bodies moving along the shore. Daniel Rothman came on around midnight. "This is Daniel Rothman. We're receiving reports of herd movements across the region. Large groups of infected converging on survivor camps. If you're in a fixed location, evaluate your defenses now. Consider evacuating if you don't have adequate fortifications. The infected are drawn to concentrations of living people. The more survivors in one place, the bigger the target." Patricia's voice. "We're also getting reports that some infected are showing unusual behavior, stacking objects to reach higher positions, using basic tools. Again, these reports are unconfirmed, but if true, it represents a significant escalation in threat level. Smart zombies. Just what we needed." As I turned the radio off and lay in the dark, listening to wind and water and my own breathing. 2 weeks later, I needed fuel again. The runs to the city were too risky, but I'd found a small marina on the west shore that usually had a few cans in the storage shed. I'd hit it once before without incident. I approached carefully, engine off, letting the boat drift the last 100 yards. Tied up to a dock post and listened. Quiet. No movement. No moaning. The storage shed was unlocked. Inside were 3 5-gallon cans, all full. Jackpot. I loaded 2 into the boat, went back for the 3rd. That's when I heard the voice. "Help." Quiet. Ragged. Human. I froze. "Please, someone help me." Coming from one of the boat slips, a yacht, 50-footer tied up at the far end. Hatches closed. I should have left. I should have taken the fuel and gotten the hell out. But the voice sounded young. Scared. I walked down the dock, bat in hand. "Where are you?" "Here, the white yacht. Cabin's locked. I can't get out." I climbed aboard. The cabin hatch had been locked from the outside with a padlock. New lock, shiny. Someone had deliberately trapped whoever was inside. "Who are you?" I asked. "My name's Kyle. Please, I've been in here for days. They left me. They just left me." "Who left you?" "Gary and his people. I got bit. On the arm. They locked me in here, said they'd come back to check on me, make sure I turned before they put me down. But they never came back." I looked at the lock. Looked at the hatch. This was a bad idea. Probably the stupidest thing I could do. "Are you bit?" I asked. "Yes. But it's been 4 days. I'm not sick. I'm not turning. Please, you have to let me out." 4 days. Daniel had said symptoms appeared within hours. If this kid had been bit 4 days ago and wasn't showing symptoms. But there were stories. Rumors. Some people were immune. It was rare, maybe 1 in 1,000, but it happened. Patricia had talked about it on one of the broadcasts. "Step back from the hatch," I said. I swung the bat at the padlock. It took 6 hits before the shackle broke. I pulled it off and lifted the hatch, bat ready. A kid, maybe 20 years old, scrambled out. He was thin, filthy, dehydrated. His left arm was bandaged with strips of shirt, soaked through with blood and pus. The bite was visible through the fabric, ragged half-circle of broken skin on his forearm. He looked at me with clear, terrified eyes. "Thank you. God, thank you." I thought I was going to die in there. You're bit. I know. But I'm not sick. I don't know why, but I'm not turning, I swear. I kept the bat between us. Let me see the arm. He unwrapped the bandage. The bite was infected, ugly and swollen, but it was healing. New skin growing at the edges. A fresh wound would have looked different. Would have looked necrotic, black, spreading. This looked like a normal infection. When did it happen? 5 days ago. We were on a scavenging run. One of them grabbed me. I thought I was dead. They brought me back to camp and Gary locked me in here. Said he'd check on me, put a bullet in my head once I turned. But he never came back. Where's the camp? South Shore, Lakeview Resort. But it's gone. The herd came through 2 nights ago. I could hear the shooting, screaming. It went on for hours. Then nothing. The herd, the one Tom had warned me about. You said they left you. How long ago? 3 days. Right before the herd arrived. Gary and most of the others pulled out, took the boats, left the old and sick behind. Said they were going to find a better location. I heard them talking before they locked me in. They were planning to head for the military checkpoint at Roseburg. I looked at this kid, looked at the bite, looked at his eyes, clear and human and desperate. This was a bad idea. I've got a place, I said. Small island, about 10 miles north. You can come with me. But you try anything at all. I'll put you in the water. Understand? He nodded frantically. Yes. Thank you. I won't cause trouble. I just want to live. I gave him water and one of the protein bars from my bag. He drank like he'd been in the desert, hands shaking. What's your name? He asked. Colin. Colin, thank you, really. I thought I was dead. We loaded into the boat. Kyle sat at the bow, giving me space, probably sensing that I was still ready to throw him overboard if he made a wrong move. The trip back to the island took 30 minutes. He didn't talk much. Just looked at the water, at the shore, at the sky like he was seeing it all for the first time. When we reached the island, he helped me unload without being asked. Carried the fuel cans up to the cave, stacked them neatly. I showed him around the small camp, the fire pit, the shower, the sleeping area. It's not much, I said. It's perfect, he said. It's safe. That night, I made fish stew with some of the canned vegetables. We ate sitting by the fire, not talking much. Kyle fell asleep halfway through his bowl, exhausted. I covered him with a spare blanket and sat watching the fire, wondering if I'd just made a fatal mistake. But his eyes had been clear, human, and the bite was healing. I checked on him 3 times during the night. Each time he was just sleeping. No fever, no thrashing, no white eyes. Just a kid sleeping hard after almost dying. Morning came. Kyle woke up groggy but alive, still human. How do you feel? I asked. Tired, hungry, but okay. Not sick. I checked the bite again. Still healing. Still looked like a normal infection. I cleaned it with some of the first aid supplies, wrapped it fresh. We need to establish some rules, I said. This is a small island. We need to work together. You pull your weight. Fish, gather firewood, help with maintenance. You get bit again. Or if you show any symptoms, any at all, I put you down. No exceptions. Understood. And we don't talk about before. I don't want to hear about your life, your family, any of that. We stay focused on now, on surviving. He looked hurt but nodded. Okay. It was harsh, but I didn't want to know his story. Didn't want to humanize him more than necessary. Didn't want another Emily situation where I'd have to shoot someone I'd started to care about. We fell into a routine. Kyle was useful. He knew how to fish, how to build things, how to work quietly. We didn't talk much, just worked. At night, we'd listen to the radio together. Daniel Rothman still broadcast occasionally. He'd found a new partner, a man named Stephen, who'd been a firefighter before. They'd set up in some kind of fortified position, wouldn't say where. Unless the world's not coming back, Daniel said one night. I think we need to accept that. The government's gone, the military's fractured. The safe zones are falling one by one. What we have now is tribes. Small groups trying to survive. Some are peaceful, some aren't. Be very careful who you trust. Kyle looked at me across the fire. You didn't have to trust me. Haven't decided if I do yet, I said. But it was a lie. I did trust him. Or at least I wanted to. Having another person around changed things, made the island feel less like a tomb. December brought storms. The lake got rough, waves crashing against the rocks, wind howling through the pines. We secured everything, moved supplies deeper into the cave, strung extra tarps for shelter. One night the storm was so bad, we had to huddle in the cave together, us listening to the wind try to tear the island apart. Kyle told me about the camp, how Gary had seemed okay at first, organized, fair. But how things changed when supplies got low, how people started disappearing, how the weak and sick were considered expendable. He locked me in that cabin and forgot about me, Kyle said. Or he didn't forget. He just didn't care. I wasn't useful anymore. People show their real selves when things get bad, I said. You didn't leave me. Yeah, well, I'm probably an idiot. He smiled. First time I'd seen him smile. Thanks for being an idiot. The storm passed. We spent the next day cleaning up. Branches everywhere, one of the tarps torn loose and wrapped around a tree. The fire pit had filled with water. We drained it, rebuilt the ring of stones, got a new fire going. Onto that night, I told him about Jennifer. Don't know why. Maybe the storm had knocked something loose in my head. Maybe I was just tired of keeping it in. She cheated on you? Kyle asked. Yeah, guy named Brandon. Tech startup douchebag. Came home early from a trip and found them in our bed. That's rough. The divorce was worse. She got the house. I got the boat and my tools and basically nothing else. Her lawyer argued I was unstable, unreliable, that I'd been drinking too much. Which was true, but still. You think about her every day, wondering if she's alive, if Brandon kept her safe, or if she's out there with white eyes and gray skin and that terrible sound coming from her throat. Kyle was quiet for a while. Then, my family's dead. Parents, sister. We were together when it started. Dad got bit trying to protect Mom. He turned in about 6 hours. Mom couldn't do it, couldn't shoot him, so I did. Then Mom just gave up. Walked outside where the infected were, didn't even run. My sister tried to stop her and got grabbed. I ran, just ran. Left her there screaming. That's not your fault. Feels like it is. We sat in silence, watching the fire. Two guys who'd lost everything, sitting on a rock in the middle of a dead world. You think we'll make it? Kyle asked. Don't know. We've made it this far. That's not really an answer. It's the only one I've got. Winter settled in. The fishing got harder. The fish went deep where the water was warmer. We relied more on the canned supplies. I started rationing more carefully, making lists, calculating how long we could last if we couldn't fish at all. Kyle suggested we try ice fishing if the lake froze. I told him the lake didn't freeze, too big, too deep. But the shallows near shore might. We could try. We built an ice fishing rig from scrap materials, waited for cold weather. It came in January, hard freeze that lasted 3 days. We ventured to the shallow cove on the northeast side of the island and cut through 2 inches of ice with a hand axe. Kyle dropped a line baited with grubs we'd dug up before the freeze. We sat there for hours, not talking, just waiting. The cold went through my coat, my gloves, settled into my bones. Then Kyle's line jumped. He hauled up a base, good-sized, fighting hard. We laughed, actual laughter, first time in months. We caught 3 more that day, brought them back to camp and cooked them fresh. Best meal I'd had since this whole thing started. The radio crackled that night. Daniel Rothman sounded different, lighter. This is Daniel Rothman broadcasting on day 123. I've got some good news for once. We've made contact with a group in Central Oregon that's managed to clear a town. Actually clear it. They've got walls, farms, working generators. They're calling it New Hope. They're accepting refugees. But the journey is dangerous, and they're screening people carefully. If you're interested, I'm going to broadcast coordinates. But be warned. The route is through infected territory, and there are hostile survivor groups along the way. This isn't a safe option, but it might be the only option. He read off coordinates. Kyle wrote them down. That's maybe 80 miles from here, he said, checking the map we'd salvaged from one of the marinas. Through the mountains, in winter. Suicide trip, I said. But if it's real, big if. Kyle looked at the map, at the coordinates, at me. We can't stay here forever. Eventually we'll run out of supplies. Or something will happen. Winter storm, equipment failure, someone gets hurt. This island's not a permanent solution. He was right. I knew he was right. But the island was safe. Controlled. The idea of leaving, of heading into the unknown with hordes of infected and hostile survivors and 80 miles of winter terrain. We'll think about it, I said. But I knew we wouldn't go. Couldn't go. The island was all I had left. February was hard. The cold, the short days, the constant gray sky. We were running low on supplies. The last scavenging run had been 3 weeks ago, and I'd barely found anything useful. The coastal areas had been picked clean. Kyle suggested we try the city. The real city, the one I'd avoided since that first disastrous fuel run. He argued that everyone else had probably avoided it too, that there might be supplies left if we were smart about it. I didn't want to. The city meant thousands of infected, meant close quarters and limited escape routes, meant high risk. But he was right about the supplies. We planned for a week, studied the map, identified targets, a sporting goods store, a pharmacy, a grocery warehouse. Planned routes in and out, talked through scenarios. The night before we were supposed to leave, I couldn't sleep. Lay in the dark listening to Kyle snore, thinking about Jennifer, about the house we'd shared, about the life that felt like it had happened to someone else. The radio was on low volume, static mostly. Then Daniel Rothman's voice, urgent. This is an emergency broadcast. New Hope has fallen. I repeat, New Hope has fallen. A herd estimated at over 1,000 infected breached the walls. There are no known survivors. If you are planning to head there, do not. The coordinates are no longer safe. I'm sorry. Stephen and I are moving to a new location. We'll broadcast again when we can. Stay alive. Kyle sat up. He'd heard it too. So that's it, he said. No safe zones, no rescue, just us. Just us, I agreed. We went to the city anyway. Had to. The alternative was starving on the island. Left at dawn. The trip took 2 hours because we had to navigate around debris. Sunken boats, floating trash, once what looked like a body, but when we got closer it was just a mannequin from some clothing store, bobbing in the current. The city harbor was a graveyard. Boats everywhere, most of them damaged or sinking. The water was thick with oil and trash. The smell was unbelievable. Rot and chemicals and something sweet sick that made my eyes water. We tied up at a dock that looked stable. Grabbed the bat and a crowbar we'd brought. Kyle had a knife, good-sized, sharp. We'd talked about trying to find guns, but neither of us knew how to use one effectively, and making noise seemed like a bad idea. The first building we tried was a bait shop. Already looted, shelves empty, floor covered in broken glass and dried blood. We moved on. The sporting goods store was 2 blocks inland. We moved slow, checking every corner, every doorway. The streets were empty. Cars abandoned at random angles, doors open, some of them burned out. Papers and trash blew in the wind. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Or maybe it wasn't a dog. We found the first infected in an alley behind a restaurant. She was trapped, caught in a gap between 2 dumpsters. Must have squeezed in and couldn't get back out. She reached for us, moaning, hands worn down to bone from clawing at the metal. We left her there. The sporting goods store's windows were smashed. We climbed through, glass crunching under our boots. Inside was chaos. Shelves overturned, merchandise scattered everywhere. But the back room was locked. Kyle pried the door with a crowbar. It took time, the wood splintering, the lock finally giving. Inside was inventory. Camping gear, mostly. Though we grabbed what we could carry. A better water filter, a camp stove that used butane instead of propane, first aid kits, rope, a tarp, waterproof matches. Kyle found a compound bow and a box of arrows. Held it up questioningly. "You know how to use that?" I asked. "No, but it's quiet. We could learn." We took it. The pharmacy was next. This one had been hit hard. The front windows were gone, the shelves stripped. But pharmacies had back rooms, storage areas. We searched. Kyle found a locked cabinet. Medical supplies, real ones, antibiotics, painkillers, IV bags, syringes. We filled a backpack. That's when we heard them. Moaning. Multiple voices, coming from the front of the store. We froze. I looked at Kyle. He pointed toward the back exit. We moved, trying to stay quiet, trying not to run, like the back door was chained from the outside. Fucking chained. Who chains a door from the outside? The moaning got louder. They were in the store now. I could hear them knocking things over, that shuffling gait getting closer. Kyle attacked the chain with a crowbar. The metal rang with each impact. Loud. Too loud. They heard. The moaning changed pitch, became eager. They were coming. The chain broke. We shoved through the door into an alley. 3 infected were at the end, blocking the exit to the street. They saw us. Started moving faster. Kyle went left, toward a fire escape. We climbed, him first, me following. The ladder was rusty, flaking under my hands. One of the infected grabbed my ankle. I kicked, connected with its face. Teeth broke. It didn't let go. Kyle reached down, stabbed with the knife. Got it in the eye. It dropped. We made it to the roof. Stood there breathing hard, looking down at the 5 infected now gathered at the base of the fire escape, reaching up, moaning. "We need to move," Kyle said, "before more come." The roofs were close together. We jumped gaps, crawled across shingles, moved 3 buildings over before finding another fire escape. Down to the street, ran for the boat. More infected were converging on the harbor, drawn by the noise from the pharmacy. We threw the supplies into the boat, untied, fired up the engine. They reached the dock as we pulled away. 20 of them, 30. Some stepped into the water and sank. Others just stood at the edge, moaning, reaching. We didn't slow down until we were out of the harbor. Kyle was shaking. Oh, that was close. Too close. But we got supplies. I looked at the backpack full of medicine, the camping gear, the bow. Yeah, we did. The trip back to the island was quiet. Both of us lost in our own thoughts, both of us realizing how close we'd come. That night, we inventoried the haul. The medicine was good, the antibiotics especially. The bow was a gamble, but Kyle was determined to learn. He spent the next week practicing, shooting at a target we set up on the beach. He wasn't good, but he got better. March brought rain. Constant rain. The island turned into a muddy mess. The fire pit flooded. We had to move everything into the cave. 2 guys in a space barely big enough for one, surrounded by supplies and gear and the constant drip of water from the cave ceiling. We got on each other's nerves. Small things became big things. The way Kyle chewed, the way I organized supplies, who had the better sleeping spot, who did more work. One night we almost came to blows over something stupid. I don't even remember what. We stood there in the cave, fists raised, both of us soaked and cold and miserable. And then Kyle just laughed. "This is insane," he said. "We're fighting over nothing." I lowered my fists. "Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm going crazy in here." "Me too." We sat down, shared the last of the whiskey, talked about before. Broke my rule about not talking about the past, but the rain and the dark and the claustrophobia made it necessary. Kyle told me about his sister. Her name was Natalie. She was 16, wanted to be a veterinarian, had a collection of stuffed animals that she'd kept from childhood and lined up on her bed. When she died, when Kyle left her dying, he could still hear her screaming his name. I told him about Jennifer, how we met in college, how she used to laugh at my jokes even when they weren't funny, how she'd wanted kids, but I'd kept saying we should wait, we should be more stable, and now there would never be kids, and maybe that was for the best in this world. But it still felt like loss. "You think she's alive?" Kyle asked. "Don't know. Hope so. Even if she's with Brandon, even if she hates me. I just hope she's alive." The rain kept falling. We fell asleep sitting up, backs against the cave wall, listening to water and wind. April brought sun. The island dried out. The garden I'd planted months ago actually produced something. A few tomatoes, some lettuce, beans that were more promise than harvest. But it was something. Proof that growth was still possible. Kyle got good with the bow. Could hit a target at 20 yards consistently. He started hunting birds. We had roasted duck one night. It was tough and gamey, but it was fresh meat and it tasted like hope. The radio broadcasts from Daniel Rothman became less frequent. Once a week, then once every 2 weeks. When he did broadcast, he sounded worn down. Day 183. Stephen's sick, not the infection, just sick. Flu, maybe, or pneumonia. We don't have medicine. We're trying to keep him warm, keep him hydrated. This is how it ends for most people now. Not the infected, just regular illness with no hospitals, no doctors, no antibiotics. A week later, Stephen died this morning. I buried him next to Emily. I'm alone again. I don't know how much longer I'll keep broadcasting. What's the point? Anyone still alive knows what to do. Stay quiet, stay hidden, stay alive. Maybe that's all there is. The broadcast ended. We didn't hear from him again for 3 weeks. When he came back on, he sounded different. Calmer, resigned. "This is Daniel Rothman. I'm going to try something. I'm going to head for the coast. There's a theory that the infected avoid salt water. Something about the salinity. I don't know if it's true, but I'm going to find out. I'll broadcast from the road if I can. If you don't hear from me again, well, it was worth a shot. Good luck out there. That was the last we heard from Daniel Rothman. Kyle wanted to try for the coast too. Said if Daniel was right, we could find a boat, head out to sea, find an island with no infected. And I reminded him we were on an island. He said a bigger island, one with resources, one where we could actually build something. We can't stay here forever, he said. It was becoming his favorite phrase. Why not? Because eventually something will go wrong. Equipment will fail. We'll get hurt. We'll run out of something we can't replace. This island's borrowed time. Everywhere's borrowed time. But some places you can borrow more. He had a point. But the island was safe. Leaving meant risk, meant the unknown, meant probably dying. I told him we'd think about it. May was beautiful. Warm sun, clear skies, the lake calm and blue. We swam, actual swimming, first time in months. The water was cold but clean, and it felt like being human again. Kyle caught a huge trout, 5 pounds. And we cooked it slow over the fire and ate until we couldn't move. Sat there in the sun, full and warm, and for just a moment, not terrified. This is nice, Kyle said. Yeah. We could stay, make this work. Yeah. But we both knew we couldn't. The supplies were running low again. We'd need another city run soon. The generator was making a weird noise. The boat's engine needed maintenance. A dozen small problems that would become big problems. June made the decision for us. I was checking the fuel supply when I noticed it. One of the cans was leaking. Had been for a while from the look of it. We'd lost maybe 2 gallons, maybe more. I calculated what we had left. With rationing, maybe 3 weeks. 4 if we barely used the generator. We need to go back, I said. Kyle looked at the fuel, at me. The city? Or the coast? Try to find Daniel's route, find supplies along the way. That's a long trip. Yeah. We spent 3 days preparing. Packed everything essential into waterproof bags. Left the rest cached in the cave. If we came back, it would be here. If we didn't, it wouldn't matter. The morning we left, I stood on the island and looked at the cave, the fire pit, the garden. 6 months I'd lived here. 6 months of survival and routine and safety. I wondered if I'd ever see it again. We headed north. The plan was to follow the shoreline, stop at towns along the way for supplies, make our way toward the coast. 200 miles, maybe more. Through infected territory and whatever was left of civilization. The first town was abandoned. Cars in the streets, houses empty. We found some canned food, a jerry can of gas, a toolkit. Moved on, and the second town had infected. We heard them before we saw them. That moaning carried on the wind. We skirted around, stayed on the water. Third town was on fire. Had been for a while. The whole downtown area was blackened rubble. We didn't stop. We camped on small islands at night. Built small fires, ate cold food, took turns keeping watch. Kyle was quiet. I was quiet. We were both thinking about what we'd left behind. On the 4th day, we found the boat. Big cruiser, 50 feet, beached on a sandbar. Hatches open. We approached carefully. "Hello?" I called. No answer. We tied up and climbed aboard. The deck was covered in dried blood. Bullet holes in the fiberglass. The cabin was a mess. Overturned furniture, broken glass, supplies scattered everywhere. And in the back cabin, we found them. 3 bodies. 2 adults, 1 child. Dead for weeks from the smell. Not infected, shot, execution style. Kyle turned away, gagging. I checked for the bodies. Found a wallet on one of the adults. Driver's license for a man named Brandon Peterson. My hands started shaking. Brandon. Jennifer's Brandon. I looked at the woman. Dark hair, gray now with decay. But the bone structure, the build, it could be Jennifer. Could be. I couldn't tell. The decomposition was too advanced. Kyle was watching me. You okay? I knew him, I think. Maybe. I searched the rest of the boat. Found a notebook in one of the cabins. Journal. The handwriting was neat, feminine. First entry. Brandon says we should head north, away from the cities. He's probably right. He's good at this kind of thing. Strategic thinking. I just wish we'd brought more supplies. Next entry. We found a group, and they seem okay. A man named Gary and his people. They're taking us to their camp. Brandon's negotiating. He's good at that too. Next entry. The camp is horrible. Gary's people are brutal. They took our supplies, said we need to earn our keep. Brandon tried to argue and they hit him. I've never seen him afraid before. Last entry. We're escaping tonight. Found a boat. Gary's people are distracted. We can make it. We have to make it. I keep thinking about Colin, wondering if he's alive, if he made it somewhere safe. I should have told him I was sorry. Should have told him it wasn't his fault. It was mine. All mine. I ruined everything, and now Brandon's trying to save me. And I just want to go home. Except there is no home anymore. The entry ended there. Unfinished. I sat there in the cabin, holding the notebook, and I felt nothing. And then everything. Then nothing again. Jennifer was dead. Had been for weeks. Killed by Gary's people, probably when they tried to leave. Executed along with Brandon, and I checked the child's body. Boy, maybe 10. One of Gary's people's kids. A refugee they'd picked up. Didn't matter. They were all dead. Kyle found me sitting there. We should go. Yeah. Did you know them? Maybe. I don't know. The bodies are too far gone. But I knew. The handwriting, the journal. It was Jennifer. We buried them on the shore. Dug shallow graves in the rocky soil. I couldn't remember any prayers, so I just stood there while Kyle filled in the dirt. I'm sorry, he said. She said she was sorry too. In the journal. Said it was her fault. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Doesn't change anything. We got back in the boat and kept moving. That night, I read the entire journal by flashlight. Jennifer had documented everything after the outbreak. How Brandon had tried to protect her. How they'd run from the city. How they'd joined Gary's camp out of desperation. How things had gotten worse. Gary killed someone today. One entry read. Just shot him. The man had been bit, but he was cooperating. He was going to leave the camp voluntarily. Gary shot him anyway, in front of everyone. Said it was a lesson about rules. Brandon wants to leave. I'm scared. Another entry. I dream about Colin, about our old life. I know he hates me. I hate me too. But I miss him, miss feeling safe. I closed the journal, looked at Kyle across the fire. She's dead, I said. I figured. Gary killed her. The people you escaped from. They killed her. Kyle was quiet for a long time. And then, Gary killed a lot of people. We sat there in the dark. Two guys who'd lost everything, who kept losing everything, and the weight of it was crushing. We keep going, I said. Make it to the coast. Find somewhere safe. That's all we can do. Okay. We reached the coast 2 weeks later. The ocean was gray and vast, and the air smelled like salt and kelp. We found a small harbor town that was mostly intact. No infected, no people either. We searched for supplies, found some, not much. The coast had been hit just as hard as everywhere else. The theory about salt water was bullshit. We found infected on the beach, wading into the surf, getting knocked over by waves and dragged back out, only to stand up and wade in again. They couldn't swim, but the salt didn't stop them. We camped in a house on the cliff overlooking the ocean. I boarded up the windows, ate canned soup, and watched the sunset over the water. "What now?" Kyle asked. "I don't know. We could take a boat, head out to sea, find an island. And then what? We're back where we started. But alive. Maybe that's enough." We found a sailboat in the harbor. 28-footer, good condition. The owner had left a manual in the cabin. Neither of us knew how to sail, but we had time to learn. We spent a week provisioning, found enough food for 2 months if we were careful. Found water purification tablets, found fishing gear, charts, a sextant neither of us knew how to use. The radio still worked. We listened every night. Static mostly. Occasionally a voice, far away, speaking languages we didn't understand. Once we picked up what sounded like music. Classical. It played for 10 minutes and then cut off. No more broadcasts from Daniel Rothman. No more emergency alerts. Just silence. On the 8th day, we sailed out. The wind was good. We figured out the basics, how to tack, how to jibe, how to read the sails. We were terrible at it, but the boat moved, and that was enough. We sailed south along the coast, didn't have a destination, just kept the land to our right and the ocean to our left, and hoped we'd find something. 3 days out, we saw smoke on the shore, a town burning. We sailed closer, could see infected on the beach, drawn by the fire. Hundreds of them. The whole town was gone. We sailed on. 5 days out, we ran into a storm. The waves were huge, the wind screaming. We tied ourselves to the boat and held on. Kyle got sick, throwing up over the side, and I just gripped the tiller and tried to keep us pointed into the waves. The storm lasted 6 hours. When it cleared, we were miles off course, and the mainsail was torn. We limped into a bay and made repairs. The sail was a patch job that wouldn't last, but it would hold. "Maybe the island wasn't so bad," Kyle said. "It was safe. We could go back? It's 200 miles. We'd never make it. So we keep going." "Yeah." 2 weeks into the voyage, we found the island. Not big, maybe 2 miles across, heavily forested. We sailed around it looking for a place to land. Found a small cove with a beach. No infected, no people, no structures, just trees and rocks and birds. We anchored offshore and swam in. The beach was white sand, soft under our feet. The forest was dense, pine and cedar. We explored. Freshwater stream, edible plants, evidence of deer or something similar, tracks in the mud. This could work. We brought supplies ashore, set up a camp, built a shelter from driftwood and the torn sail, made a fire pit. That night we sat by the fire and listened to the ocean. "Think anyone else made it?" Kyle asked. "Probably. Somewhere." "Think they're doing better than us?" "Some of them, maybe." "Think the world will come back?" I looked at the fire, at the stars overhead, at the ocean stretching out to the horizon. "No," I said. "I don't think it's coming back. I think this is it now. Small groups, islands, survivors. This is the world." Kyle was quiet. Then, "Could be worse." "Yeah, could be worse." We sat there in the dark and the sound of the waves, 2 guys who'd survived the end of everything. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something like peace. The island became home. We built a better shelter using logs and salvaged materials from the boat. Found a cave system inland that we used for storage. Planted a garden using seeds we'd saved. The fishing was good. The waters around the island were full of salmon and cod. Kyle got better with the bow. He could hit a bird in flight. We had fresh meat regularly. I repaired the boat. The sail was never perfect, but it held. We made trips back to the mainland every few weeks for supplies. The towns were getting more dangerous. The infected were congregating in larger groups, drawn together by some instinct we didn't understand. But we learned to be careful, to move quietly, to avoid confrontation. Months passed. Summer turned to fall. The garden produced. We preserved food for winter, built a smokehouse, unmade jerky from deer Kyle shot, dried fish. We stopped listening to the radio. There was nothing to hear anymore. Just static and occasionally the sound of someone else out there in the dark, broadcasting to nobody. One night, Kyle asked me if I was happy. I thought about it, about Jennifer, about the life I'd lost, about the world that was gone. Not happy, I said, but alive. That's something. Yeah, he agreed. That's something. Winter came. We sealed up the shelter, stockpiled firewood, settled in for the cold months. The storms were brutal, but the shelter held. We played cards by firelight, told stories, argued about stupid things. One night during a particularly bad storm, Kyle asked me about the journal. Jennifer's journal. What did she say? I'd kept it. Didn't know why. It was in my pack and wrapped in plastic to keep it dry. She said she was sorry, that it was her fault, that she missed me. You forgive her? I thought about it. Doesn't matter now. She's dead. Forgiveness is for the living. But do you? Yeah, I guess I do. We were both stupid. Both made mistakes. And in the end, it didn't matter. The world ended anyway. Kyle nodded. My sister, Natalie. I think about her every day. About leaving her, about running. You survived. That's what matters. Is it? It's all that matters. Spring came again. We'd been on the island almost a year. The garden was bigger. We'd built a second shelter for storage. The boat was seaworthy again after extensive repairs. We talked about exploring, finding other islands, maybe finding other survivors, building something bigger than just the two of us. But we didn't go, and the island was safe. Small, manageable. Leaving meant risk, and we'd had enough risk. One day in April, we saw a boat on the horizon. Sailboat, heading north. We watched it pass. Didn't signal, didn't try to make contact. Just watched it disappear over the horizon and wondered where they were going. That night, I asked Kyle if he regretted coming with me. No, he said. You saved my life. Gave me a chance when you didn't have to. I'll always be grateful for that. You've earned your keep. We're even then. Yeah, we're even. We sat by the fire, watching the flames, listening to the ocean, and I thought about how strange it was. The world had ended. Everyone I'd known was probably dead. The cities were ruins. Civilization was gone. But here I was, alive, fed, safe, with someone I trusted. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It wasn't the life I'd wanted. But it was a life. And for now, that was enough. The seasons cycled. Summer came hot and dry. We spent our days fishing, maintaining the garden, exploring the island's interior. Found more caves. Discovered a grove of apple trees growing wild, probably planted by someone decades ago. The apples were small and tart, but they were fruit, and we harvested as many as we could, storing them in the cool cave. Kyle turned 21 in July. At least we thought it was July. We'd been keeping track of days with marks on a tree, but we might have been off by a week or two. We celebrated anyway. I found a can of peaches I'd been saving, and we ate them straight. The syrup sweet and thick. This is the weirdest birthday I've ever had, he said. Better than being dead. That's a low bar. It's the only bar we've got. We laughed, real laughter. It felt good. August brought smoke from the mainland, Forest fires, probably started by lightning. We watched the glow at night, the sky orange and angry. The fires burned for weeks. When the winds shifted, ash fell on the island like gray snow. We stayed inside, covered the water collection barrels, waited it out. When it finally cleared, the mainland shore looked different. The forests we'd seen were gone, just blackened hillsides. The fires had consumed everything. "You think the infected burned?" Kyle asked. "Maybe. Fire kills them. But there are a lot of them. Some probably survived." We sailed closer to shore a week later to check. The docks we'd used were ash. The towns were gutted. And yes, there were still infected. In fewer, but they were there. Wandering through the ruins, searching for something they couldn't remember. We didn't go ashore. Just turned around and sailed back to the island. September brought the first frost. The garden died back. We harvested what we could. Beans, squash, late tomatoes, preserved everything. We'd gotten good at it over the year. Smoking, drying, pickling in the vinegar we'd found during a mainland run. The deer population on the island had grown. We saw them regularly now. Kyle shot one in October. We butchered it, used every part. Meat for eating, hide for leather, bones for tools. Nothing wasted. Life fell into a pattern. Wake, work, eat, sleep, repeat. It was boring, predictable, safe. I found myself missing the radio, missing Daniel Rothman's voice, and missing the connection to something bigger than just our small island. Kyle found me trying to fix the radio one day in November. "What are you doing?" "Thought I'd see if I could get it working again." "Why? There's nothing to hear." "Maybe, but maybe there is." I worked on it for a week. The battery was dead. I tried to rig something with the solar charger we'd salvaged, but I didn't know what I was doing. Finally got a weak signal, mostly static. I scanned through the frequencies. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Then a voice, faint, female. "Broadcasting from the southern archipelago. We are a community of survivors, 38 individuals. We have shelter, food, and security. We are looking for others. If you can hear this, we are located at..." The signal cut out. I tried to find it again. Scanned for an hour. Nothing. But I'd heard it. Proof that someone else was out there. Someone organized. Someone with enough resources to broadcast. I told Kyle. "Where's the southern archipelago?" he asked. We checked the charts. Could be 100 places. Could be 500 miles away. Could be impossible to reach. "We should try to find them," Kyle said. "Why? We've got everything we need here." "For now. But what about next year? The year after? What happens when something breaks and we can't fix it? What happens when one of us gets hurt? We need more than just the two of us." He was right. I knew he was right. But the island was safe. The ocean was full of unknowns. "Let me think about it," I said. I thought about it for weeks, weighed the risks, the potential benefits. The simple fact that Kyle was right, we couldn't stay isolated forever. December brought the decision for me. Kyle cut his leg while working on the boat, deep cut down to the bone. I cleaned it, stitched it with the medical supplies we had, gave him antibiotics. The wound got infected anyway. Within 2 days, he was feverish, delirious. The infection was spreading despite the antibiotics. The wound smelled wrong, looked wrong. I didn't know what to do. I kept him hydrated, changed the dressing, gave him more antibiotics, even though they clearly weren't working. On the 3rd day, he woke up clear-headed. "I'm dying," he said. "You're not dying. Colin, I can feel it. The infection's too deep. You don't have the equipment to fix this. We both know it." I didn't say anything. He was right. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry I'm leaving you alone." "You're not—" "Yeah, I am. But you need to promise me something. Promise you'll find those people, the ones on the radio. Don't stay here alone. Find them. Build something. That's what Emily would have wanted, what Natalie would have wanted, what I want." "Okay," I said. "I promise." He smiled, closed his eyes. "Good. That's good." He died that night, quietly, just stopped breathing while I sat next to him. I buried him on the island, high ground, overlooking the ocean, dug the grave deep, covered it with rocks to keep animals out. I didn't cry. Just stood there looking at the grave and feeling empty. That night, I packed the boat, took everything essential, left the rest in the cave. In the morning, I sailed away from the island, headed south, toward where the voice had come from, toward maybe finding other survivors, toward something other than dying alone on a rock. The ocean was vast and gray and empty, but I kept sailing anyway, because I'd made a promise, and promises were all we had left. The first week alone was the hardest. No one to talk to, no one to share the work, just me and the ocean and the constant movement of the boat. I passed other islands. Some looked inhabited. I saw smoke, structures. But I didn't stop, didn't signal. I'd learned that desperation made people dangerous. Better to keep moving. The weather turned cold. Storms rolled in from the north, one after another. I reefed the sail, tied everything down, and rowed them out. The boat held. Barely. I lost track of days. The sun rose and set. I sailed south. That was all that mattered. Food was running low. I fished when the weather allowed, caught enough to survive, then rationed the canned goods. Drank rainwater collected in the tarp. 2 weeks into the journey, I picked up the signal again. "One southern archipelago. Community of survivors. We welcome refugees. Coordinates are 42 degrees, 17 minutes north. 124 degrees, 8 minutes west. We have food, shelter, medicine. We are rebuilding. If you can hear this, please respond on frequency 73.5. I checked the charts, plotted the coordinates. Maybe 60 miles from my current position. 3 days of good sailing, I changed course. The coordinates led me to a chain of islands. 5 or 6 of them, varying sizes, all clustered together. I approached carefully, sailed into the channel between 2 islands and saw them. People, real people, working on docks, tending to boats, moving with purpose. A voice called out from the shore. "Ahoy the sailboat, state your business." I killed my speed, let the boat drift. "Looking for the survivor community. I heard your broadcast." A pause, then, "Come alongside the dock. Slow, we're armed." I did as instructed. 3 people waited at the dock. 2 men, 1 woman, all carrying rifles, all looking wary but not hostile. I tied up, stepped onto the dock with my hands visible. "I'm Colin. Came from up north. Been on the water for 3 weeks. The woman lowered her rifle slightly. "You alone?" "Yeah." "Bit?" "No." "We need to check. Standard procedure. You understand?" I nodded. They searched me, checked for bite marks. Took my weapons, the bat, the knife, a hatchet I'd picked up. One of the men went through the boat. "He's clean," the man reported. "Supplies look legitimate. Nothing suspicious." The woman studied me. "Why are you here?" "Looking for other survivors. Looking to build something. My partner died 3 weeks ago. He made me promise to find people, to not stay alone." She considered this, then nodded. "We'll take you to see Margaret. She runs things here. She'll decide if you can stay." They led me through the community. It was bigger than I expected. maybe 40 people that I could see. Structures built from salvaged materials, gardens, a central area with a fire pit and benches. Children playing, actual children, living, laughing. I hadn't seen a child in over a year. Margaret was in her 60s, gray hair pulled back, sharp eyes. She sat at a table in a large building that served as a community center. "Colin," she said, "welcome. Tell me your story." I told her about the island, about Kyle, about Jennifer, about everything that had led me here. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You've survived a long time on your own. That takes skill. We could use someone with your experience. But we have rules here. Everyone works, everyone contributes. Violence against community members results in banishment. Hoarding results in banishment. We share everything. We decide everything together. Can you live with that?" "Yes." "We have a probationary period, 30 days. If you work out, you stay. If not, you leave peacefully. Agreed?" "Agreed." She stood, shook my hand. "Welcome to New Harbor." The first month was adjustment, learning the community's rhythms, the work rotations, the supply chains, how they manage security, food production, water collection. And they'd been here 8 months. Started with 6 people. Grew slowly as more survivors found them. They broadcast regularly, bringing in refugees. Vetted everyone carefully. Had turned away people who seemed unstable or dangerous. They'd lost people too. 1 to illness, 2 to a boat accident, 1 to suicide. They had a cemetery on the highest island, small crosses marking graves. I worked fishing detail mostly. Took boats out with others. Brought in catch. It was good to work alongside people again. To hear voices. To laugh. At night, the community gathered around the fire, shared food, told stories. Sometimes someone played guitar. Sometimes people just sat in comfortable silence. I found myself healing. The emptiness from Kyle's death didn't go away, but it became manageable. Became part of the background instead of the foreground. And after 30 days, Margaret called me in. "You've done good work," she said. "People like you, trust you. The council voted. You can stay permanently if you want." "I want," I said. "Good. Welcome home, Colin." Home. Strange word, but looking around at the community, at the people working together, building something in the ruins of everything, it felt right. I'd lost everything. My marriage, my old life, Jennifer, Kyle, the world as it was. But here, on these small islands, with these survivors, I'd found something new. Not the same. Never the same. But something worth fighting for. Worth living for. And for the first time since the outbreak started, I felt something that might have been hope. The seasons turned again. My first winter in New Harbor was harsh, but we weathered it together. The community grew. Even more survivors found us. By spring, we were 63 people. We expanded, built new structures, cleared more land for gardens, established trade routes with other survivor communities along the coast, developed systems for everything, education for the children, medical care, conflict resolution. Life became routine again, but different than the island. This routine included people, community, purpose beyond just survival. I took on more responsibility, led fishing expeditions, helped train new arrivals, served on the security detail. One day in May, a boat arrived carrying 3 new refugees, a man, a woman, and a teenage girl. They looked exhausted, traumatized. We went through the standard procedures, checked them for bites, questioned them about where they'd come from. The man's name was David. The woman was his wife, Rachel, and the girl was their daughter, Sophie. They'd been hiding in a farmhouse for 18 months. ran out of food, heard our broadcast, made the dangerous journey to find us. We almost didn't make it, David said. Got caught in a storm, lost most of our supplies. But we're here now. We're safe. Margaret welcomed them, assigned them to temporary housing, started them on the probationary period. I saw Rachel the next day in the garden. She was teaching Sophie how to plant seeds, showing her how to space them properly, talking about how long they'd take to grow. It reminded me of Jennifer, how she'd wanted kids, how she'd talked about teaching them things. I walked over. Need any help? Rachel looked up, smiled. Sure. Sophie, this is Colin. He's one of the community members. Hi, Sophie said. Quiet, shy, when we worked in the garden together. Planted tomatoes, beans, squash. Rachel told me about their journey, the farmhouse, the months of isolation, the fear. But we made it, she said. We're alive. That's what matters. Yeah, I agreed. That's what matters. Over the following weeks, I spent more time with Rachel and her family, helped them adjust, showed them around, introduced them to others. Sophie warmed up eventually, started talking more, even smiled sometimes. She was 15, had survived hell, but she was resilient. David was harder to read, quiet, watchful, protective of his family. I understood that, respected it. One evening, Rachel and I were on dock duty together, watching for infected, for hostile boats, for anything unusual. Thank you, she said. For what? For helping us. For being kind. A lot of people wouldn't have been. We all need help sometimes. David told me about your wife. I'm sorry. I was quiet for a moment. It was a long time ago. Different life. Still, I'm sorry. We sat in silence, watching the sunset paint the ocean gold and red. This place, Rachel said. It's special. Margaret's done something amazing here. Yeah, she has. I want to be part of it. Want Sophie to have a future, even if it's not the future we imagined. It's the future we've got. That's enough, she said. It has to be. Summer came. The gardens flourished. We had more food than we'd had in months. The fishing was exceptional. We preserved everything we could, preparing for winter. The community held a celebration. First real celebration since I'd arrived. We cooked fish over a bonfire, shared stories. The children ran on the beach, chasing each other, laughing. I sat with Rachel and David, watching Sophie play with the other kids. She's happy, Rachel said. First time in so long. Kids are resilient, David said. More than we are sometimes. I watched Sophie tackle another girl into the sand, both of them laughing. And I thought about Kyle. About how he'd wanted me to find this. To build something. He'd been right. That night, after the celebration died down, I walked to the cemetery. Found Kyle's grave in my memory. He was buried on the island, not here, but I could still visit him in spirit. I did it, I told him. Found people. Built something. Like you asked. The wind carried my words away, but I felt lighter. Like I'd fulfilled a promise. Like I could finally start to let go. Autumn brought challenges. A storm damaged several structures. We lost a boat. Supplies ran low and we had to ration carefully. But we made it through. Together. Winter was hard again, but we were prepared. We'd learned. Adapted. Survived. And when spring came again, when the ice melted and the garden started to show green shoots, I realized something. I was 45 years old, living in a world that had ended, surrounded by strangers who'd become family. And I was okay, not happy every day. still carrying grief, still remembering everything I'd lost. But okay. And that was more than I'd thought possible 2 years ago when I'd first heard Daniel Rothman's voice on the radio, telling me the world was ending. The world had ended, but life hadn't. It had just changed. And we'd changed with it. The community kept growing. By the second summer, we were over 100 people. Margaret established a council. 6 people elected to help make decisions. I was nominated, declined at first, but Rachel convinced me to accept. "You have experience," she said. "You've survived alone, with a partner, now with a community. You understand what works." So I served, helped make decisions about security, resource allocation, expansion plans. We established contact with other communities, 3 more along the coast, shared information, traded supplies, talked about eventually connecting, building something bigger, but we moved slowly, carefully. Too much too fast had destroyed the old world. We weren't going to repeat those mistakes. I grew closer to Rachel over the months. Not romantic, just friendship, understanding. She'd lost as much as I had. More, in some ways. But she kept going, kept hoping. David remained distant. I respected that. Some people needed their walls. Sophie started calling me Uncle Colin. Don't know when it started, but it stuck. I'd teach her fishing, how to repair nets, how to navigate by stars. She reminded me of what Kyle might have been if he'd lived longer. Full of questions, full of life. One day she asked me about before. What was it like? The old world? I thought about it. About cities and cars and phones. About grocery stores and restaurants and movies. About all the things that seemed normal then and impossible now. Complicated, I said. We had everything we needed, but we weren't satisfied. Always wanted more, always rushing. Never appreciating what we had until it was gone. Do you miss it? Sometimes. But not as much as I thought I would. This life is simpler, harder in some ways, but clearer. You know what matters. What matters? People, work, contributing, taking care of each other. The things we took for granted before. She thought about that. I don't remember much. I was 13 when it started. Mostly I remember being scared. You're not scared anymore. Sometimes, but less. This place feels safe. It is safe. We make it safe. Yeah, she agreed. We do? 3 years after the outbreak, Margaret called community meeting. "We've done well," she said. "Better than I ever hoped. But we need to think bigger. The communities along the coast are talking about forming an alliance, sharing resources, coordinating defense, maybe eventually rebuilding some infrastructure, power, communication. We're voting on whether to join." The debate was long. Some people wanted to stay isolated, safe, small. Others argued for growth, for rebuilding, for trying to create something that might last beyond our lifetimes. I spoke in favor of the alliance. "We can't hide forever," I said. "And we shouldn't have to. We've proven we can survive. Now we need to prove we can build. For the kids, for the future, for everyone we lost who'd want us to keep going." The vote was close, but the alliance won. We sent representatives to the first gathering, planned joint expeditions, shared technology, started building something bigger than just New Harbor. It was slow, frustrating sometimes. People had different ideas, different priorities. But it was progress, real progress. 4 years after the outbreak, we made contact with a group that had secured a small hydroelectric plant. They had power, limited but functional. We sent engineers, worked with them to expand capacity. Within a year, New Harbor had electricity for the first time since I'd arrived. Lights, refrigeration, tools that actually worked. It felt like magic. Sophie was 17 now. Smart, capable. She'd joined the council, youngest member ever. She had ideas, energy, hope. She was the future we were building for. 5 years after the outbreak, we established a school, real school, with teachers and curriculum and books salvaged from the old world. The children learned reading, math, science, but also practical skills. Fishing, gardening, construction, navigation. An education for the world we lived in now. I taught a navigation class, using charts and compasses and stars. Some of the old methods that didn't require electronics. The students were eager and grateful. They'd grown up in the apocalypse, but they wanted knowledge, wanted to understand. Rachel taught literature, reading old books, discussing stories, keeping culture alive. It matters, she told me. Not just survival, beauty, art, stories. That's what makes us human. She was right. 6 years after the outbreak, we attempted radio contact with communities further inland. Got responses, faint but real. There were people everywhere, small groups, isolated, surviving. We started broadcasting regularly, sharing information, coordinates of safe zones, warnings about infected movements, hope. Like Daniel Rothman had done, like Emily and Patricia and Stephen, passing the torch. One night I was on radio duty and I picked up a familiar frequency, one that Daniel had used. Static. Then a voice, young, uncertain. This is anyone listening? We're in Portland, or what's left of it. Small group, 20 people. We need help. Please, if anyone's out there. I grabbed the microphone. This is New Harbor. We hear you. You're not alone. The voice on the other end broke, crying. Thank God, thank God. We thought we were the only ones. You're not. How many people? What's your situation? We talked for an hour. I gave them coordinates, directions, promised help. The community voted to send a rescue expedition. Dangerous, long journey, but worth it. I volunteered to lead it. Rachel tried to talk me out of it. You've done enough. Let someone else go. I need to. For Daniel. For Emily. For everyone who helped me when I needed it. You'll come back? I'll come back. The expedition took 3 weeks. We sailed north. Found the group in Portland. They were in bad shape. Starving, running from infected, but alive. We brought them back, all 20. The community welcomed them, fed them, gave them hope, and we kept going. 7 years after the outbreak, we'd connected with over 30 communities, hundreds of survivors. We'd established trade routes, communication networks, defense agreements. We'd started rebuilding, not the old world. That was gone. But something new, something better maybe. Built on cooperation instead of competition, on community instead of individualism, on need instead of greed. It was fragile, always would be, but it was real. I stood on the dock one evening, watching the sunset. Rachel joined me. Thinking about her? She asked. Jennifer? Yeah, sometimes. You forgave her? Yeah. Good. Holding on to that would have poisoned you. What about you? You forgave the world for taking your old life? She smiled. Working on it. Some days are easier than others. We stood in silence, watching the light fade. Colin? Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For being here. For caring. For building this. We built it together. Yeah, she agreed. We did. 8 years after the outbreak, Sophie got married. Young man from one of the other communities. Good kid. Smart. Hard-working. The wedding was simple. ceremony on the beach. The whole community attended. We celebrated with fish and vegetables from the garden, and even some wine made from berries. It was beautiful. I sat with Rachel and David, watching Sophie dance with her new husband, and I thought about all the weddings that would never happen, and all the futures that had been stolen. But this one wasn't stolen. This one was earned. 9 years after the outbreak, I turned 52. The community threw a celebration, made me a cake from hoarded flour and precious sugar, sang. I looked around at the faces, at the people I'd come to love, at the life we'd built from the ashes of everything. Kyle was right. This was worth living for, worth fighting for, worth everything. 10 years after the outbreak, we held a memorial service for everyone we'd lost, everyone who hadn't made it. Margaret spoke, listed names, so many names. Daniel Rothman, Emily Chen, Stephen, Patricia, Jennifer, Brandon, Kyle, Natalie, all the others, thousands, millions. We stood in silence, remembered. Then we looked forward, to the children playing, to the gardens growing, to the boats in the harbor, to the lights in the evening, to the future we were building. The world had ended, but we hadn't, and that made all the difference. I stood on the highest point of the island that night, looking at the lights of New Harbor below, the community we'd built, the life we'd created. Somewhere out there, other survivors were doing the same, building, hoping, living. The infected still roamed, dangers still existed. Life was still hard, but we were here. We were alive, and as long as we were alive, there was hope. I thought about the first day on my small island, alone, terrified, listening to Daniel Rothman's voice on the radio, telling me the world was ending. He was right. It had ended. But something new had begun, and I was part of it. We all were. The survivors, the builders, or the ones who refused to give up. I turned and walked back down to the community, to Rachel and David and Sophie and Margaret and everyone else, to home, to life, to whatever came next, because there would be a next. As long as we kept going, kept fighting, kept hoping, there would always be a next. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Thanks for watching, guys. I will be back with another story.